Today we are going to study the form and function, function analysis and coherence. Whatever we're going to study today is a part of coherence because conversational implicatures or politeness principles or functions or speech act theory, which we are going to cover in the next week inshallah. All of these are the part of coherence because these features are responsible to form coherence in the conversation. Linguistic form and functions are divided into the function of language, the spoken and written language, sentence and utterance. What is the function of language? The function of language you have already studied in detail. That is given by Roman Jacobson. However, there are certain views regarding the function of the language. The first view is transactional view. Transactional view is that the most of the time when we are communicating, the function is that we are trying to give information to someone. It reflects the idea that the most important function of the language is the expression of the content. The interactional view, on the other hand, is something that is involved in the expression of social relations and personal attitude. That is the emotive and the affective function of the language. So, as the very word suggests, that is the interactional view. The language is any language is used for interactional reasons. Then we have spoken and written language. That is, we can communicate all these functions in the form of spoken as well as in the form of written language. Written can be changed into spoken and spoken can be changed into written. These representation of discourse, when it is in the form of written text, we normally call it written text. However, the same spoken text when transcribed would be considered written, but they are transcribed, and in the same way we call it a written text. So sometimes written can be changed into oral, and that is spoken, and spoken can be changed into written. However, if you look into detail of informal and formal languages, that is codes in sociolinguistics, so these codes are specifically determined on the basis of how you're communicating, because normally in written communication we follow formal code, that is formal language. However, in spoken we normally follow informal conversations. But at the same time, when it comes to discourse analysis, if you look at the conversation that we have in text messages, they are normally informal. So there's not a definite way in which you can say that we always use informal communication or informal code when we are communicating in a spoken, or we always use formal codes when we are using written communication. Because sometimes when you are communicating with your elders, you use very formal communication even if it is spoken. However, at the same time we have this issue of vernacular language, that is vernacular or colloquial, which is the part of informal code as well. So the boundaries are not very definite. However, this is the part of research where you look into a text and you decide whether it is informal, what are the features which is making it informal, what are the features which is making it formal, and how does this all lead to not just discourse analysis, but also CDA. Then we have the difference between sentence and the utterance. Now, the basic difference between sentence and utterance is that sentence is the part of utterance. That is, when you remove the words or the rules or the structure from the utterance, that would become a sentence. Utterance is basically linked with the context. So, for instance, you come to the class every day. You say good morning. The same good morning is a sentence, but it is different utterance. When each time you say good morning, even if you repeat the same phrase or structure again and again, for example, good morning, good morning. These two utterances are two utterances. However, these two utterances are considered as single sentence. Though language has many functions, however, the function of transmitting information is considered the most important, and it is termed as sometimes as a referential function. Discourse analysis is used as an umbrella term for all the applied linguistic studies. So, if you know what are the features of discourse analysis, then you'll be able to know a lot more in the other fields of applied linguistics as well. For instance, CDA. CDA is nothing if you don't know how to do discourse analysis, because language is very important when it comes to CDA. So it is something that goes beyond the sentence level. That is, we actually analyze the context in that as well. We have majorly two types of functions. One is macro function and one is micro function. Macro function you have already studied, which is given by Roman Jacobson. However, it was further developed by Delheims in 1962. I'm sorry, I guess 1962. And there are some elements of communication, that is the addresser, the addressee, the channel, the message, the topic, and then different functions, that is the emotive function, the directive function, the phatic function, the poetic function, etc. So these are the macro functions. However, under these macro functions we have micro functions. Micro functions are those functions which help us to identify the name, or the name the things, record or release in emotional energy, communicate, socialize, think, and enjoy through language. Not just these, but all tiny things that we can do with language are the part of micro function. However, each of these micro functions can be linked with the macro functions of the language, which you have already studied. So let me give you an example. If you look at this micro function, that is directive function, you'll see that the directive function is linked with questions, orders, requests, pleas, and prayers. Now, all these can be the part of directive function. However, if you choose this one request, which may further lead to other microfunctions, that is requests for action, request for information, request for help, request for sympathy, and etc. Right? So if we start from the micro function, or the divided part of the micro function, that is a request for sympathy or request for help, that can be linked with any of the macro functions. And at the same time, any macro function can be further divided into micro function. So it can go both ways. Functional analysis and coherence. What is actually functional analysis? Functional analysis is the function of any utterance. That is what an utterance is doing in a specific context. That is what a sentence is doing in a specific context, which would automatically become an utterance. And how does it change the meaning? Even whatever reply do you get from that utterance in a specific context, how does it lead to coherence in a communication? Let me give you an example. That is, the window is open. If you look at this example, we can have many functions depending on who says it, to whom, and in what situation. So let's suppose if we say the window is open is said by a husband to a wife in the middle of the night, which is actually the expression of worry. That is, maybe a thief is there. So it changes the meaning. Now let us consider that this sentence is used by HOD to the students while inspecting a classroom, which may suggest that it is maybe an order to close the window because maybe it's noisy there. Or let us take another example. That is, this sentence is used in a context where it is said by Sherlock Holmes to Dr. Watson. It means that it is an interpretation. That is, it's a clue, an evidence that I believe that it is something that from where the case is going to be solved. So if we use this sentence in different contexts, it becomes utterance. However, in each context, by the speakers of the speakers of the sentence, and by changing the receiver of this utterance, as well as by changing the situation, you may completely get a new meaning from that. The same utterance is doing things, and according to what it is doing, it gets more and less suitable answer as well. So if the window is open is actually the expression of anxiety or worry, so there is a reply to that, and that answer is don't worry. That is, a husband or a wife is saying don't worry. That is reassurance. Or if the window is open is an order by HOD to the students, then maybe you're receiving an apology, or maybe a very different answer. We don't know. Maybe the students would reply as sorry sir. That's an apology. In the case of interpretation, if it is an interpretation where Sherlock Holmes is using it, you can get a reply like, for example, oh, I see, that is an understanding. So the replies or the answers may also vary depending on whatever the function of the utterance is, or in whichever context is it used. There's always a sequence of function that you can identify, and you can look into that. An order in the manner they follow each other. That is, as I've explained, like in the example of the window is open as an expression of anxiety, then there is reassurance. So if there is a request, then it would be followed by refusal, or it would be followed by, accepting. So there's always a manner which is followed. You know that when you write an application to your HOD, it would be accepted or rejected. So that's the function which is always in a sequence. This sequencing does not only happen in a discourse between two people. So far we are discussing the examples which are happening between two people, or maybe more than that. But it is not necessary that it will always happen between two people. A single speaker may carry many of these functions in one sentence. If you read this sentence, "Sorry, love, I saw you were home. There's a cat stuck under the gate at number 7. If you look at the sentence structure, you'll find 3 important functions. The first one is apology. Then there's explanation. Then there's a request. But this overall structure is leading to something else. This apology, explanation, and then a request is actually kind of requesting someone to do something. However, this doing is not explicitly stated. So the procedure of this function is not always so easy. Most of the utterances do not fall into such neat categories. There can be, sentences or utterances where you'll feel that they follow more than one function, or they perform more than one function. Hence, we can say that one utterance can perform many functions. Meanings may vary with the context. That is, we have denotative meanings and we have connotative meanings. So if you look at the connotative meanings, so they may vary in different contexts. Maybe the sentence structure is the same, but the utterance is different. So a sentence may have a semantic meaning and it may have a pragmatic meaning. Semantic meaning is exactly the meaning of the sentence, the words. However, pragmatic meaning is actually the meaning which is from the perspective of the speaker, or the way it is used. To look into a sentence, sometimes you'll feel that it is grammatically incorrect. However, it will still communicate the function, or it will still communicate the meaning. So you might have seen like friends communicating with one another with incorrect grammar, that is, they use s, or for example, they normally say, "How is the use?" So they are using s with it. Or for example, "House is use." So as the fun factor, sometimes people make fun that all the time you're using s, and it has been very common among male friends, these young teenagers. It's very common among them that they use s with almost every word within the sentence, and they try to make fun. However, it is communicating the meaning as well. So though the sentence structure is grammatically incorrect, but still it is communicating the meaning. So to establish the meaning of an utterance pragmatically, we need to look at certain theories, and among those theories, it is that we have conversational principles and we have speech act theory. Implicatures. The term implicature was first coined by Paul Grice, in 1975, to establish it from the notion of implication used as a logic and semantics. So it first started as in a book, Syntax and Semantics, in order to understand what logic and conversation is. You have already read this chapter. However, I wanted to go into detail of it, how to analyze it and link it to the next topic, which is politeness. Implicature is characterized simply as whatever is communicated that is not the part of what is said by a speaker. That is, if you look at the structure of the sentence, it is not actually what the speaker is communicating. The speaker is communicating something very different from what is actually said by the speaker. It is related to the term imply. So, you have heard the word implied meaning. So implied is actually implicature. It is also related to the terms like imply, suggest, or mean, which is related to implicature. There are two types of implicature. One is conventional and one is conversational. As we'll be talking about conversational implicatures, however, conventional implicatures are where it lies within the sentence. That is, you are implying something, but this is implied through a sentence. So, if someone says, he's Pathan, he's brave. So, it is implied that normally Pathans are considered as, brave. So, this suggests that it is conventional implicature. However, there are certain complexities when it comes to conventional implicatures, and you need to read it into detail in order to understand. And we'll discuss conversational implicatures here. Types of conversational implicatures. We have two types of conversational implicatures. First one is generalized conversational implicature, and the second one is particularized conversational implicature. In generalized implicature, some conversational implicature is used. However, it is without the reference to a special context. That is, you don't need to have very special knowledge of that context in order to understand what is said. So if we go back to the example that I gave in the previous slides, that was the window is open. So if I tell you who said that, and if I tell you what was it set for, there is no special knowledge that you will be requiring to understand that. So in generalized conversational implicature, you do not depend on particular features of the context, but instead the propositions are expressed, and those propositions convey a complete idea. For example, a simple question that is, what do you like to eat? and the answer to that would be something that you like to eat. That is, let's suppose I like to eat I like to eat burger. So you don't need special context to understand that. That is generalized implicature. The first example is very clear. However, if you look at the second example, that is, the leader asked staff, "How do you feel about Ali these days?" The reply is, "He usually goes out late at night with someone who has a husband." Now, this is the reply, that is, he goes with a lady who has a husband. And then the leader replies, "That's so bad. Do you know who that woman is?" And he replies, "Yes, she's his wife." Rather than saying it directly to the boss, he is twisting and turning his conversation. However, it is implied, but it is generalized implicature. You don't need special context in order to understand that. In particularized implicatures, you have to understand the specific context in order to understand what is going on. So if you look at this example, that is, where is my book? The answer is, your sister, your younger sister is drawing something. So over here in this sentence, your young sister is drawing something. This implies that something is happening. However, we aren't aware of that. We can second guess that maybe the sister is drawing on the book, but we can't be sure. So the action draw of the young sister is not conveying anything about book. And in order to understand what is the reply, or what is it trying to implicate, in this case depends on the context as well as on the utterance itself. So we have to link these both together, and then we have to understand the meaning, or whatever the implied meaning is. In that case, we will call it particularized implicatures. In conversational implicature, the implications derived on the basis of conversational principles and assumptions rely on more than the linguistic meaning of the words in a sentence. That is, schema. I hope you have heard about this word schema. Schemas are actually something which is present in your brain, and you have understood those concepts after living. That is, a child isn't aware of many concepts, but those concepts are formed when a child is growing. So we know that when you are going somewhere, you would reach, if you're going from point A to B, you would technically reach somewhere after some time if you're continuously traveling or if you're continuously walking, because that's how it works. So not just based on the language, that is the linguistic meaning of the words in a sentence, there are other things as well. In psycholinguistics we call it frames, in cognitive linguistics we call it frames of the brain. That is, frames are those social meaning which are constructed in throughout our life. So we know certain things not because they make sense linguistically, but because we know that this is how the society works. So it can be, schemas, the knowledge that we have in our mind. If you look at this from the perspective of implicature, and you feel that a linguistic meaning of word is completely correct in a sentence, however, within that implicature, those other aspects which I have stated as, something which is socially
or we see that, some logically it works like this. So that implicature can be cancelled. For example, I drove to university, mm, or I drove to the market, but I didn't reach anywhere. Or let's say I drove to the market, but I did not drive anywhere. Logically, if we look at this sentence, we see that if you are driving somewhere and you did not drive anywhere, it does not make any sense. So in that case, the implicature will be cancelled. So if A is implicating B, that is, if A is saying something to the B, if it is the case that uttering A in a certain conversational context, that is, let's suppose we take the example of the driving, and systematically suggests that, the whatever is said, B is actually true. Some cases that would be implicated, however, in other cases it may be cancelled. As I've given you the example that I drove to market but did not drive anywhere. We know by our schemas that it is not possible. If you're driving somewhere, you'll actually reach somewhere. So it does not make any sense. That is why the implicature will be cancelled. However, if that implicature is, different, that is, it makes sense, then it will be implied, which would be discussed in the coming slides. Okay, let's suppose it's the example is that, do you like linguistics? And B says this is the implicature. So if A implies something which is, do you like linguistics, and B is replying that, well, let's just say I don't jump for joy before class. Is it a straightforward answer? No. Does it imply something? Yes. Does it make sense? Yes, it does. So the implicature is applied. It is not cancelled here. So A asked B about his feelings about the class, and B said uh, that B didn't celebrate before the class. It shows the uninterested feelings of B about linguistics subject. However, it implies something. Cooperative principles are observed through conversational implicatures, and that in that case you have 4 maxims that we talk about, and Paul Grice gave those maxims. That is the maxim of quantity, quality, relation, and manner. The maxim of quantity is make your contribution as informative as is required. That is, whatever exchange or conversation you're having at the time, your contribution as relevant to the information should be as it is required. Do not make your contribution one that is true. For example, are you at the office? The reply would be, yes, I am. You will see me at room 12. So the reply which is required is, are you at the office? The reply is, yes, I am. However, you know that based on the context, you know that whether the person is asking you just because the person wants to confirm that are you in the office, or does the person want to meet you? If the person wants to meet you, then in that context you need to tell him or her that you'll see me at room 12. However, if the person is just inquiring, depending on who the person is just inquiring about your presence in the office, then you would say, yes, I am. This is the requirement at that time. So your quantity must be according to what is required. The maximum of quality. The maximum of quality is when you're supposed to uh, be true. That is, do not say what you believe to be false, and do not say that for which you lack adequate evidence. That is something that you um, don't have evidence for, or if you believe is false, you shouldn't say that. For example, do you think that smoking is good for health? B. No, I think it's not good for our health. Now, in this case, you know that it's true and you believe it as well. That is why you're saying it. So, quality is that whatever you're saying should be true. The maxim of relation, that is, be relevant. For example, why do you learn English? Yes, I learned it because of my hobby. So you're giving just the answer, that is, whatever is relevant to the question, you need to answer that. The rest, you don't need to go into detail of that. The maxim of relation is linked with the other maxims as well, so you need to keep this in your mind that the maxims may overlap. The maxim of manner is like to avoid ambiguity or be orderly or avoid obscurity of expression. That is, the way you are saying something should be said properly, in a proper manner. For example, what do you think about Halong Bay? I like Halong Bay. It has a lot of beautiful caves. So the person has asked you about what do you think, and that is how you're going to answer that. Now, based on those maxims, look at the example that we have discussed previously. That is, sorry love, I saw you were home. There's a cat stuck under the gate at number 7, or the window is open. Based on the maxims that we have discussed, combine them with the general knowledge of the world, and then you know you can reason from the literal semantic meaning of what is said and link it to the pragmatic meaning. So if you look at this sentence, what is the pragmatic meaning of it? One by one, looking at the sentence structure, there's a shared knowledge, right? And cooperative principle is that when you apply it. So if you look at this example, I started with the knowledge from my experience of the world that a cat is likely to be very unhappy at being stuck under a gate. That a human, by virtue of greater intelligence and mutual understanding, is likely to be able to free such a cat which is actually stuck under the gate. That humans generally like to alleviate the suffering of pets, and that in every society you need to do that if an animal is in in trouble. And we believe in the practical abilities of human beings. That is, every human being can do that. If a cat is stuck under the under any gate or is in trouble. From the cooperative principle, I also assume that, for instance, someone's neighbor was telling the truth. That is, why would someone joke about something like so serious? Or maybe if someone is actually hallucinating, then it's fine. Or maybe they are lying, then fine. But I don't believe that someone will lie about this, that there is a cat stuck under the gate, right? So technically, from the cooperative principles, I assume that whoever said that, probably the neighbor or anyone, is actually telling the truth. I also assume that she was being relevant. That is, she was relevant with whatever she was saying. If she had, come and said that there's a flower growing in the garden at number 67, though this would also be true, it would be hard to see its relevance, because why would someone tell me about a flower growing in the garden? However, this seems something very serious and relevant, that you know it's true as well. However, the example of the flower may also be true, but it would be hard to believe that it's relevant. Taking all this knowledge and all these examples and all these maxims into account, it is possible to explain how I can interpret these three sentences, or you can say structures, to function as a request overall for the help in freeing the cat, as having a pragmatic meaning in this sense, that is, to free the cat. So if we apply cooperative principle, that's how we get to know the meaning, that in these three structures, you would not see anywhere that the person is saying please free the cat, though it is possible that the person is directly asking, but here they are not asking directly. So the way this cooperative principle is working is actually implying this, and it is implicature, and indirectly asking, that is, kindly free the cat. This is the pragmatic meaning of it. The same example can be taken in the window is open, and in this example you can say that the implicature could be like, for example, if you are a guest and you are at someone's place and it's being very cold, and you're feeling cold, and you say the window is open, you're actually asking the person to close the window. So it's a request once again. However, the way you are implying it, there is no request, that it is not visible in the structure of the sentence. You could have asked like, please close the window, but rather than saying that, you are saying the window is open. So this is how you imply something. And understanding the context, the host would understand that it's cold because it's cold. So we all are human beings, and being human, we feel cold in the weather, in such cold weather. And if the window is open, so technically the logic says that it's like the air is coming in, and in winters we normally close the windows and doors. However, if the window is open, so, and you have also indicated it that the window is open, then it is suggesting that it's a request to close the window. So that's how we understand the implicature. However, these four maxims seem very easy, but they are very difficult to understand in terms of how they are exploited. That is, sometimes they are violated, sometimes you opt out of them, sometimes you face a clash. Now, what is meant by all these terminologies? Violating is that in some case you're actually leaving the maxim. You're actually not following the maxim. You're violating the maxim. That is, you are not telling the truth, as in the maxim of quality, or maybe you're, you know, giving a lot of information when it is not required. That is violating the maxim of quantity, and so on. Or you can opt out from the operation, both of the maxims. That is, um, you intentionally, opt out of it. And that would be, for example, if someone is saying something to you, you're intentionally doing something like that. So sometimes it happens that when you're very angry, so you try to, explain things a lot of, in detail, or you're, when you're ironically saying something, or for example in class a student is asking a question which is very stupid question, and you have already explained it, and you know that, the student is asking a question just for the sake of the question, and the teacher knows that the student is teasing the teacher, so the teacher would explain it in a lot of detail with very, very extremely easy language, and you're actually trying to opt out from the maxim, which is maxim of quantity. So that's because you are unwilling to cooperate in that way, the way the maxim requires, right? You may also face a clash. That is, you may be able to fulfill the first maxim of the quantity, let's suppose it's just quantity, without violating the maxim of quality. So sometimes violating one maxim may lead to the violation of, observing one maxim may lead to the violation of the other. Politeness principles. Now, whatever is, when we are flouting the maxims, or when we are observing the maxims, it's very important to link it with the politeness principles as well. Robin Lakoff formulated politeness maxims, and these maxims are: don't impose, give options, make your receiver feel good. So for example, when you say, I'm sorry, I saw you were home, you're actually you're not apologizing for, anything else, but you're the way you're saying it is because you want to make it more polite. But then if you want to be polite at the same time, you might violate some, maxim. I'll give you a very, very common example. If someone is giving a one word reply to you, you would feel offended, because you'd feel that, the person is trying to ignore you. So however, if the question is asked which requires a yes no answer, and the person is giving a yes no answer to that, only yes or only no, or you're informing and you say, oh, the person says okay or something like that, then the maxim is observed, but then the politeness principle is violated. So sometimes the politeness principles and cooperative principles are, often in conflict. Social basis of conversational principles. They are normally used to act efficiently together with other people, as well as to create and maintain social relationship. So if you look at these two functions, they are linked with the face. It was a concept, and that concept was given by Brown and Levinson, which is they studied politeness phenomena and came up with this idea of face of other people. That implies that people avoid each other's territory, for example, physical or field of knowledge or friendship, or they seek to enlarge the territory. For example, they make others feel good on the assumption that the same will be done to them. So if they are actually, trying to do good to the other person, then they are actually expecting it for themselves as well. And this face value also varies from culture to culture and so on. So also, you know, the in the manner of indicating respect for face may be cultural specific as well. That is, somewhere if you are meeting someone, but let me give you the example that in Pakistan there is this very common way of a handshake when you are meeting someone. If some in some culture there is not, so if you extend your hand for the handshake and someone doesn't, because it's not how it works in their culture, then both of you would be offended. So it's just the example of the face value. You're also given an assignment in which you have to study in detail the politeness phenomena, and you have to do a little research on that, that is reading, and then you have to come up with your argument. Now, what is the difference between politeness principle, devices, and strategies, and different how different scholars have talked about, or researchers have talked about politeness.